Hi, it's time for good energy, and I'm Dr. Julie, and welcome to Bodyful Day 222. We are talking about skin rashes and the senses, and today we're talking about the sense of touch. Today is day 6 of our series on skin rashes and the senses, and we're going to dig into how the sense of touch can both help and heal our skin rashes. All right, so let's start with the basics. The stoop is a little cold, so I need to pull my coat down a little bit. Let's take a deep breath in and release. With this next deep breath in, I want you to expand in the belly, expand in the chest, and expand into your sinuses. And as you do that, your body's going to rock back a little bit. So take a deep breath in. And release. And today because we have been, as we've been doing this series, we've been breathing into various skin rashes. And today we're going to breathe into athlete's foot. Have you ever had athlete's foot? It is itchy, it is irritating, it is obnoxious. I want you to take a deep breath and breathe in to athlete's foot, memories of athlete's foot. Take a deep breath in and release. All right, so today is on skin rashes and the senses, and we're going to talk about the sense of touch. Remember, throughout all of this, our goal is to find energy to heal our skin or make our skin healthy equals good energy and minus stressors. And we are talking about some of the most, I want to kind of go over some of the most common and most annoying skin conditions and skin rashes that we deal with. So when we think about how these affect our body and how they affect our sense of touch, they play into maybe how we can figure out how to use the sense of touch to come up with a solution. So eczema, we've talked a lot about eczema, rosacea, and psoriasis, but we've also breathed into things like canker sores and cold sores. We breathed into athlete's foot. We've talked about chronic eczema. We haven't touched on hives, but hives are also something that frequently people encounter. And then, of course, the last one is a common condition that we don't think of very often encountering, but we see it a lot in ourselves, or we see it a lot in our children. It's called Kerasis Polaris. Kerasis Polaris exists on the shoulders and on the thighs, and they look like little pimples, little zits. And they are not necessarily, they don't have a touch component, but except for when you run your hand down your arm, it is rough and stubbly rather than smooth and soft. So today we're going to talk about how the sense of touch can go into and affect all of those. So we've already a little bit talked about eczema, psoriasis, and rosacea in terms of sense of touch. They are a stressor. Physically, and we can put athlete's foot in there, and we can put cold sores in there, and we can sometimes put hives, because hives can actually be itchy as well. Those are stressors. They actually cause that top layer of skin to be irritated, and that irritation does take away from your ability to do anything else. You don't have, not only just do you not have energy to have clear skin or have healthy skin, you also have no energy to wash your clothes, wash your dishes, stay tucked in on the task that you're doing. That stressor of chronic skin conditions really does cut the amount of energy that you have to get anything else in your experience, get anything else in your life accomplished. And so you spend a lot of time focusing on the pain, irritation, and obnoxiousness of that. That means that you could be doing other things. So obviously skin rashes and dermatologists, particularly, dermatologists do a lot of business because this is a stressor. This takes a lot out of your life, and if there's something that you can do that will automatically fix it, of course you want to do that, because then you have more energy to do what you want to do. When we think about hives and we think about Kerasis Polaris, and we talked a little bit about canker sores, because when we talked about the sense of taste, that those have a tendency to be a little bit more connected to foods and what we're eating. So Kerasis Polaris is notoriously linked to gluten sensitivity. Gluten sensitivity and dairy sensitivity, and so a lot of people have found relief by backing away from gluten and dairy. I have had experiences with a couple of patients that find that Kerasis Polaris actually goes away with reducing your corn consumption. The same thing can be said for cold sores and canker sores. We talked about canker sores with acid foods. Hives usually are triggered by a lot of different, a particular food, tomatoes, alcohol. Chronic acne is an interesting one because that is sometimes driven by your gut, and it is sometimes driven by where you're at and what kind of surrounding you're in. If you were to come into my office and say that you were a gymnast or a wrestler and you had chronic acne, I would be really likely to send you to a dermatologist and have that cultured, because most likely it was a chronic staph or chronic strep infection that you got off of the mat. And a lot of times cystic acne is more of a chronic skin infection picked up from the surrounding, or from being on mats and being on shared surfaces. For a lot of people who suffer eczema, especially if they suffer it long enough, there is a chronic infection that exists in those spots, and sometimes people really do well with apple cider vinegar because that has a tendency to clear out those points. Of course, you got to do it when it's not cracked, because when it's cracked, that's most painful. That's where we talked about a couple of episodes ago when we talked about the vestibular. We talked about the importance of salt water. Salt water does the same thing. Salt water gets rid of those infections that exist on the outside of the skin. Athlete's foot is an interesting one. Athlete's foot is, again, a sense of touch. It causes that itching and irritation between the toes. We know that it is fungal driven because almost any of the athlete's foot creams are antifungal creams. Now, I have had I was just reminded of a patient that, of a person that asked me about athlete's foot a while ago, and I had said, well, just put a little cinnamon in your food. And we've talked about the importance of drying spices. And in fact, if you look at this week's healing equation, .com on the blog there, the Energy to Heal blog is about proliferation in pumpkin pie spice. And pumpkin pie spice is one of those spices that have the ability to go from the inside and arrest fungal infections. So if you're interested, check that out, thehealingequation.com. We have also talked about the fact that for a lot of these, rubbing them or picking on them doesn't really heal. In fact, the irritation makes it worse. If you think about chronic eczema, you're going to go and you're going to scratch, and your scratching will also, we get back then to the fact that you are spreading an infection from one site to another, especially if you've picked something off the ground and then you've gone ahead and scratched at your eczema. Acne can be the same way. A lot of patients find soothing relief from things like witch hazel and particular antiseptic toners because they feel good and cool to the skin. They're cooling. And with that in mind, cooling is another way to help the skin. You can actually cool your skin if you have a serious hive or a reaction or a rash, because it provides temperature relief through those cutaneous nerves. Now, what's interesting about some of these is that they respond well to heat. So a lot of us who have maybe rosacea and eczema and psoriasis, we find that when we are out in the sun, out getting vitamin D, that does actually help our skin, and that sunlight, that ultraviolet light does help our skin. And in fact, one of the treatments for chronic psoriasis and chronic rosacea, chronic psoriasis specifically, is ultraviolet light treatments. And so there are cases where our skin needs to be cold, it needs to be warmed, it needs to be cooled. And sometimes just having some other option to do when you want to scratch is also healing. So you can use rolling balls. You can roll balls on your, or roll, having rollers, but the term is not coming to me. You can, well, there are various options that you could do to try to avoid you scratching, and they involve texture and touch and temperature, and applying some of those can actually calm down the irritation in the nerve. If you remember from a Bodyful episode, probably about 5-6 months back now, we did it on daddy rubbies. And daddy rubbies are an enhancement of the gating, or are tied to the gating hypothesis, which is that when you activate sensory neurons around an injury, it has a tendency to send good energy in right in directly to the spine, and then the spine blocks the pain or itching sensation that goes up to the brain, so that that spot becomes less obnoxious. So using other senses of touch when you have an irritation on a skin rash is actually a very good way of gating or reducing the amount of stressor energy that you have. So while skin rashes and skin conditions do cause a lot of stress, we can use the sense of touch to reduce the amount of stress that they have by activating different features of touch: vibration, temperature. We can activate the hair cells by blowing, having just like light touch or blowing air across the skin can actually calm the body down. And in calming, it helps reduce the amount of stress and the amount of signal that goes to the brain. All right, so it's kind of been all over the map today. I apologize for that. But we have one more day left on skin rashes and the senses. And so I hope to see you back here tomorrow. Let's finish this off. Take a deep breath in and release. Have a great day. I'll see you here tomorrow.